Comicbook.com. Dungeons & Dragons executive director explains why Darksun hasn't been revived. The executive director is Kyle Brink, and he's been going on an interview tour to kind of clear up the bad press around the OGL 1.1. Hello, and welcome back to my channel. Please remember to like, comment, share, subscribe. Make sure that you're still subscribed. You can find me on Rumble and on Twitter. There are links down in the description box. Now let's get into this article. While Wizards of the Coast is returning to several classic campaign settings, they're a bit more reticent on bringing back one popular setting. Earlier this week, Dungeons & Dragons executive director Kyle Brink spoke with the Bob the World Builder YouTube channel, continuing a series of appearances to rehabilitate D&D's image in the wake of the OGL controversy. During the interview, Bob asked about the prospect of a Darksun revival, a dark post-apocalyptic setting that focused on scarce resources and moral ambiguity. So yeah, Darksun was pretty awesome. Came out in 1991. It might have, yeah, it was 1991 or 1992. I think it was December of 1991. And it was basically Mad Max meets medieval fantasy. It's pretty crazy. We'll talk more about it at the end of the video. It was kind of really D&D's first actual role-playing setting. Although those of you gamers out there are probably going, what are you talking about? They had Forgotten Realms and Greyhawk, and it was always medieval fantasy. Yeah, those are all stolen settings, right? I mean, there's nothing really that original about Forgotten Realms or Greyhawk or just medieval fantasy. That comes out of Tolkien, right? We know that D&D came directly out of Tolkien's world. Gary Gygax and his friends, they were playing the TSR game, and they started giving personalities to their generals and stuff, and then they developed this role-playing system, which is pretty awesome thing to do. I wish they'd done it better, though. As you already know if you watch my videos. We're not going to read this next paragraph. We're going to listen to the interview directly. Here you go.
And I feel like I know the answer to this. Any potential that we would see a revision or republishing of the Darksun setting ever?
So the ever is the operative word there.
Okay,
so
maybe forget the ever and let's just say in the next 5 years.
So I'll be frank here. The Darksun setting is problematic in a lot of ways, and that's the main reason we haven't come back to it. We know it's got a huge fan following, and we have standards today that make it extraordinarily hard to be true to the source material and also meet our ethical and inclusion standards. So,
yeah, that's totally fair point, and I think that's already kind of the consensus. People, I think, just wanted to hear somebody say it.
We know there's love out there for it, and God, we would love to make those people happy, and also we've got to be responsible.
I'll leave a link down in the comments to the full interview. I'm going to have more clips throughout this recording as well. We're going to talk about regarding this interview with Bob the World Builder. Let's go back to the article. Brink's answer probably isn't a surprise to many who follow Dungeons & Dragons, especially as the game tries to move past certain problematic center content found in past editions. While Darksun was a popular setting in both 2nd edition and 4th edition, its post-apocalyptic tone, use of certain fantasy archetypes and stereotypes, and its heavy use of slavery as a symbol of oppression would likely need to be updated due to evolving views on how oppressive systems are depicted in games. Oh, there's that dreaded word, slavery. You know, anytime we talk about slavery, it only refers to the North Atlantic, African, United States slave trade. That's it. Just so ridiculous. However, there are at least a few current D&D creators who are interested in attempting modernized Darksun in a way that stays true to its current themes. For instance, Edgett George, one of the design leads for last year's Journeys Through the Radiant Citadel, expressed his interest in tackling a Darksun revival that would approach the setting as a sort of dark counterpart to the more uplifting themes of the Radiant Citadel adventures. All right, so Kyle Brink needs to just shut up. He needs to stop talking. There's nothing here. It's like, we haven't come back to it because we have standards today that make it extraordinarily hard to be true to the source material and also meet our ethical and inclusion standards.
That just sounds like slavery with extra steps.
What are your ethical and inclusion standards? This is Sadira. Who is Sadira, you might ask? Why do I care about the Sadira person? This is one of the main characters in the book series called The Prism Pentad. Prism Pentad is a 5-book series, the initial series for the Darksun setting in Dungeons & Dragons. Excellent read. If you really want to read a good series, that's it. You probably don't want to give WotC any of your money if you're listening to me. Go find it on eBay. Go find it on Amazon used already. The Prism Pentad, really good stuff. But Sadira here, she looks really black, doesn't she? She was a slave in the series in the beginning. She looks super black, doesn't she? I mean, damn. Look how black she looks. Got blue eyes, red hair, white skin. What do you know? Not like a black person at all. Rikus. This is Rikus. He was also a slave. Does he look black to you? I mean, seriously. In fact, all the people here in this image right here, this is a Road to Uruk cover art design, which was the second book in the Prism Pentad series. And you can see Sadira there holding that double-tipped spear. That's Rikus there. Do any of these people in the image look black to you? How is it that slavery is automatically associated with black people, period, hands down, that's it? That's the only way that it can be. We already looked at the Hadozi that they're all complaining about and crying about. Oh my gosh, no, the Hadozi, they're standing for black people. There was nothing in the description in 2nd edition or in 5th edition. I've looked through 4th and 3rd. I looked through every book in 4th and 3rd edition. And I could not find them. When the 3 black halflings said, "Oh, well, it was a previous edition that I was reading from about the Hadozi and how they were stand-ins for black people," it was so obvious. No, there's nothing in any other books. Only in 5th edition and in 2nd edition does it say anything about their background, really, like a tiny little bit, and it doesn't say anything about them being a slave. It has nothing in there about, hey, there was a group of people on one continent who were white skinned, and they went to a different continent where almost all the people were black skinned, and they started enslaving the black skinned people. And then that group of white people, they found another continent across the ocean, and they started shipping the people to the continent of black people to this new continent that they found. Nothing about that at all, but yet the Hadozi are standing for the North Atlantic slave trade. These people are insane. They are literally insane. I cannot even begin to describe to you the insanity of these people. But they're not going to bring back Darksun, I'm assuming, because it has slavery in it. That's the only thing I can think that is so-called problematic in some way. And that was a major plot point. It was a major plot point in the Prism Pentad. Tyre, the free city. There's 7 city-states, and Tyre stands up to overthrow their wizard king and free the slaves. They became the first free city, and as far as anybody knew ever. You know, human memory only goes back so far. Elf memory should go back a lot farther. Well, I'll talk about Darksun at the end. If you're not familiar with it, stick around to the end. I'm going to talk all about how Darksun is, and I'll give you some information about it. It's really kind of an interesting way of handling medieval fantasy. There are some other things that were said in this interview that I wanted to cover, because Kyle Brink seems to be dishonest. When he said in the 3 Black Halflings interview that, you know, oh, the Hadozi slipped under our radars. We have this board, and that one just got past the inclusion and sensitivity readers scope. And no, it didn't get past them. There's nothing wrong with the Hadozi. So I think he's also lying when he says this here.
Kyle, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I am currently the executive producer of Dungeons & Dragons, but I've been a player and Dungeon Master since 78, running the same campaign since 88.
He's been a DM since 1978. You look at Kyle Brink, he looks like he's about 40. I don't know how old he is, but if he was 40, that means in 1978 he was -5. Yeah, you were not a DM in 19... I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's like in his 50s, and then he could have been a DM in 1978. But he doesn't look like it. He doesn't act like it. He doesn't sound like it. He certainly does not seem like he is in his 50s. Maybe he is, but I think he's full of it. I tried finding his age on the interwebs. I could not find it. Maybe there's somebody out there who can do more, who can more easily research this stuff and find the answer. I couldn't find it. So he says he wants to include as many different people as possible in this thing called Dungeons & Dragons. We need to make sure that we're totally inclusive.
Larger audience, because D&D's been growing. It's a much bigger audience than it was when the OGL was written, much more diverse. So there's not only more people, but also more kinds of people, people from all kinds of different life experiences who need to be taken care of, who need to be given the welcoming, inclusive game that we have today. And we were very concerned about what hateful content might do to that audience as well.
Well, that just sounds like slavery with extra steps.
Yeah. You're not being totally inclusive. You're not inclusive to people like me who don't want to play a game that it limits my character options so much. We're going to get into this a little bit more when we watch this other clip right here.
What other new products are being developed in order to meet the company goal of further monetizing the D&D brand?
So the way I view monetizing is making stuff that people want to buy. And so in order to do that, we have to make more products. And the main area that we're looking at right now is what can we make for players? Because DMs have all kinds of stuff they can buy from us. But players have a relatively limited range of stuff. Settings are somewhat interesting to players, but like adventure anthologies, that's for DMs. Campaigns, that's for DMs. And so what we're looking at is what can we make that's more interesting to the player. So that's our focus there.
That just sounds like slavery with extra steps.
Okay, so you're never going to be able to market to the players. Players want to show up to the game, toss down their character sheet, maybe a cheesy drawing of their character, sit down, pull out their pencil and their dice, and then play a game. The only thing you can market to players is dice. You could make D&D pencils, okay. There's nothing you can market to players that are going to get them interested in buying stuff. This is the problem you have when you're dealing with a game like this. And this is why I think that they are being dishonest about their intentions with the OGL. This interview is mostly about the OGL. So if you're interested in knowing more about the OGL and what that controversy was all about, then you can watch this interview. I think they're looking at their bottom line going, we cannot keep working this way. In this interview here, he says the intention was to keep like a financial powerhouse from coming in and taking over the space or changing D&D in some way. That sounds like BS to me. How is it that they're going to come in and change D&D? That would, first off, not do them any good because the D&D rules have already been established in 5e. That's not going to help them. They're not going to want to do that because then they're going to be making an entirely new game that is not going to be focused on D&D. They're going to go from, well, we have these new rules that we're going to implement instead. And it's going to be D&D, but we're implementing these new rules. That's not going to fly. So I don't think that that's the reason why they made the OGL the way that they did. That maybe was a consideration. It was maybe a minor consideration. So they're like, oh, let's spread that idea because I think they'll most likely believe that. No, the reason they were doing it was because they wanted to make money off of developers who are making money off of this space. That's it. I don't know what else to say about that. You're not going to get players to want to spend money on this because the game is not diverse enough. The game itself is not. You're very limited. You have to choose a race, and now they're calling it species. You have to choose a species to play. Okay, you have to choose a class, and you're limited by the number of races and classes there. There's 12 classes. Let me ask you this, dear viewer: are there 12 professions in the world? Yes, they have the paths now, which makes it a little bit more diverse. So you can be like, there's 2 different types of barbarians. There's 3 different types of monks. Okay, great. So that expands the number to like 30 different classes. How about there's an infinite number of classes, because I can define my barbarian any way that I want to. And this is going to bring me to the next point here, where Kyle Brink talks about other games.
Well, I'm currently playing in a game of Scum and Villainy, which is based on the Blades in the Dark rule set, and that's fun. It's the space opera version of it, and I'm playing an insectoid pilot, so I'm playing a space bug. So that's fun. I enjoy that quite a bit. I've had a lot of fun. Ooh, it's kind of a tie. Depends on what direction you want to go. So if you go old school, I like GURPS for the flexibility. Like you could do basically anything, but it's the opposite of heroic fantasy. Like it's real easy to die in GURPS, and it's not like D&D. But for just like speed of play and ease of play, Savage World is pretty great. I also have enjoyed Spirit of the Century for just like straight up bananas, interwoven narrative pulp fiction stuff.
Now, my big question here is, how can you possibly play GURPS, which is potentially the best role-playing game ever made? I think it's won more awards than any other role-playing game. How can you go from playing GURPS to playing Dungeons & Dragons, like the worst role-playing game ever made? I don't understand how you can go and play GURPS and then be like, I want to play D&D now. Hey, viewer, if you've done that, if you've been like, hey, look, I played GURPS and these are the reasons why I went back to D&D. Other than D&D is like McDonald's, it's everywhere. I see no reason to play D&D. GURPS I don't think is in publication anymore, by the way, you can't get it. Savage World's a good game that he mentioned he plays. See, even he likes it. That's still in publication. You can get that. And you need one book. Wow, one book. What do you know? You get one book, you can play Savage Worlds, and you can play Darksun. You can set it in Darksun setting. No way you could buy the Darksun box set. You can buy it used probably on Amazon or something, or at least get like a PDF or get the gist of it. And I'm going to tell you the gist of it here at the end in a few minutes. So now that we know that Kyle Brink is full of crap, I don't understand why he is. It just seems like there's too many things like, wait, that doesn't quite add up. That doesn't quite. Are you really in your 50s? Because you don't look or act like it. Are you really telling me that you made the OGL to keep big mega corporations from taking over D&D? Really? Because that seems like that's a violation of copyright if they were to go that far. Okay. What do I know? I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but it seems like that's the case. And then they got to be inclusive. Yeah. You're not actually allowing people to be included in the game. The only way to do it is to be like make an open role-playing game. GURPS, generic universal role-playing system. GURPS. You can do whatever you want to. The GM decides on the setting. You guys play in that setting, and you can even work in conjunction with the players. Be like, I want a character who's going to be like this. Okay, you make that character. And let me tell you, WotC does not care about diversity and inclusion. They care about their bottom line. If not having diversity and inclusion improves their bottom line, they will do that. If having diversity and inclusion improves their bottom line, they will do that. Diversity and inclusion. So there's two ways we can do it. D&D is like obsessed with finding balance amongst the characters. Obsessed with finding balance amongst the characters. All of the classes must balance against one another. They must all be equal. Impossible to do, but all right. The only way that you can possibly do this at all is to reduce the number of abilities that the classes have. The barbarian, he would probably get a really good attack ability. He'd probably be really tough. And then you give him like an ability at first level and then one ability every 3 levels after that. So you'd get one at first, 4th, 8th, 12th, 16th, and 20th. And then 24th if you want to go higher, whatever. But that's a limited number of abilities. It also means that your character is going to be more precious because a lot of these abilities now in 5th edition, they cross over one another. Like, hey, the thief has this ability. Hey, so does the monk. The monk has the same ability. What do you know? Well, it's crazy. Hey, look, I took a feat. Hey, I got that same feat. Hey, look, I took that same feat too. Everybody's like got the same special abilities. So what they've done to allow for all these different special abilities in the game is they've added extra rules into the game that don't need to be there. The game should be very as simple as possible. The base rules, the base play rules should be as simple as possible. And then you add abilities on top of that. The only other way to make classes balance against one another, the only other way to do it, actually not two, there's 2 other ways, but we're going to talk about this as the only game mechanic way of doing it, is to make a game like GURPS, which gets completely open and everybody gets 50 points or whatever, however many points they get. Because in GURPS, you build your character out of points. In the hero system in Savage Worlds, you get different point values and you build your character up from that point value. So if I'm playing a game where I start out with 100 points, hey, the guy sitting next to me starts out with 100 points too. It's very much more balanced that way. The only other way to do it is to have a GM who's very mindful of making sure that everybody has a part to play in the system, in the game. And that's going to be dependent on the GM. You have to get a good GM for that. And most times you're not going to get a good GM, which leads to the problem that Dungeons & Dragons has in my eyes, which I don't know why people don't see this, but if you have a crap character in D&D, there's nothing you can do to fix that. Not entirely nothing, but it's hard to fix that. Whereas in a game like GURPS, where if you have a crap character, you can go, hey, look, my character isn't really doing much. Can I focus on this area? And most GMs will be like, yes, you're able to shift your focus of your character and go down this path, and then you can become more valuable to the group. That's the only way to really do it. Now, we're going to talk about Darksun. Darksun is a medieval post-apocalyptic fantasy setting, and they don't have gnomes. So if you're playing D&D and you're like, hey, look, I want to play a gnome, you can't play it in Darksun. They don't exist. They have other races you can play, like the Thri-kreen or the mules. Gnomes were killed off. This is all from me reading the books and stuff, and I have not reviewed the books, so if I get something wrong, please bear with me. But this is going to be at least 90% accurate. A long time ago on the planet of Athas, which is where Darksun is set, there was a race of beings, and one of those guys was like really ugly. So he spent a lot of time on his own, and I want to say that they had psychic ability on the planet, base psychic ability on the planet. Everybody like could study psionics and become really psychically powerful. And then this ugly guy, he discovered magic, and he became really powerful with magic. And then he set out to cleanse the world of Athas, and so he built up these generals around him who were all human, because humans apparently have the greatest amount of diversity as far as the use of magic and psionic abilities are concerned. So they can become the toughest in those 2 areas. And they were hunting down and exterminating ogres, orcs, gnomes, some other races too. They were working on exterminating every race except the halflings, because the halflings are the one true race that just came into being in the beginning of time, or the oldest intelligent race, etc., whatever. And his human generals, when they figured this out, they're like, you're not going to make humans the one and only true race? They turned on him and imprisoned him. And the way that it works is magic destroys the environment as you use it. If you're very careful with magic, you can kind of keep the balance, but it's harder to use magic if you're that way. It's not as powerful, etc., whatever. So if you want to use magic to its true potential, then you'll just destroy and kill as you're casting spells. It draws the life force out of the things around you, and this turns Athas into a desert. There is only one dragon. Well, one dragon that's known of anyway. But the dragons, they draw in so much power that that's such an ecological disaster with there being just this one dragon. So I imagine that the dragons would be few and far between if there were. They did explore like a very small, like a tiny little area of the planet. Not even as big as the United States. So it's actually smaller than, I think, even the smallest state It was just a tiny area that they explore in the setting. There are no, I can say there's very few metal weapons or metal. Period. There's just very little metal on Athas, and so the weapons are made out of bone, wood, or stone. Typically, sometimes you'll find it like I think the rule if you had a metal weapon, it was automatically a +1 to hit, +1 damage. And then like your bone, stone, wooden weapons, they would break if you rolled a critical failure, you break the weapon. They had a lot of slaves, and they had gladiatorial games. And one thing that like about Athas that they could have put in really easily that they didn't was the barbarian. There could have easily been barbarian bands. In fact, they kind of alluded that the elves were very nomadic and like tribal in nature. They didn't have the barbarian in there. Well, it doesn't really matter if you're gonna use Savage Worlds to play the Athasian setting, play the Dark Sun setting. It doesn't really matter because hey, you can just be like, we have barbarians, fine. Define a barbarian for me. By the way, the true definition of barbarian, as I recall, is a non-Greek. There's a lot of room to work with there. They didn't have monks, which is my favorite class, but I mean that kind of makes sense that they wouldn't have monks because monks don't really make sense in D&D. Period. DM It All did a video on this, and I'll leave a link to that down in the comments. DM It All has a really good channel if you want to learn about Dungeons and Dragons. They have some really good stuff in there. But I mean, you could easily have like martial arts in Athas. Why wouldn't you? I mean, really, martial arts existed all over the world and still do today. They've been around for thousands of years because people want to hurt each other. So that is the basic Athas setting. It is a desert world with magic that destroys the planet. Oh, and one other thing, halflings are eco-terrorists. They're like against the whole destruction of the world, and they want it to return it to nature, etc. It's an interesting setting. It's not the most creative and clever of all the settings that could possibly be out there. I had my last group that I played in, the GM, he was like, I don't want to play a Dark Sun because like the world can kill you. I'm like, you can ignore that part, really. I mean, in fact, people ignore parts of D&D all the time because you can't play D&D the way the rules are set. They just can't. It's just they're too restrictive. And I've never known anybody who plays D&D strictly by the rules. They always change the rules. Everybody does. I've never seen anybody play strictly by them. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. This guy was probably as true to the rules as possible, but yeah, okay, if you don't like the fact that you can fall into a sinkhole and die, or that there's like these creatures that blend into the surroundings so well that you can't really tell they're there until you walk on top of them and then they bite you and you die. Okay, don't use those creatures. Don't have sinkholes appear for your characters. It's really that simple. You can set up the setting however you want to. That's the easy part to change. The harder part to change are the game rules. So anyway, that's all I got for this time. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.